November 24th, 1971. A cold, rainy afternoon in Portland, Oregon. At the airport terminal, everything seemed like any other holiday weekend. Passengers lined up for Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305, a short 30-minute hop to Seattle. Among them was a man who would become a legend. He called himself Dan Cooper. He was dressed in a dark suit, a crisp white shirt, and a slim, black mother-of-pearl tie pin. Cooper took his seat at the very back of the cabin, 18C. He was quiet, composed, and appeared to be just another businessman on a trip. After the engine started, he ordered a bourbon and soda. He paid his bill calmly while the plane taxied toward the runway. As the Boeing 727 climbed into the thick clouds, Cooper gazed out at the rugged, misty landscape of the Pacific Northwest below. Moments later, Cooper handed a note to flight attendant Florence Schaffner. She initially thought it was just a phone number and dropped it in her purse. Cooper leaned in and whispered, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." The routine flight was about to change forever. To prove his threat, he opened his briefcase. Inside, she saw red cylinders and wires. The mystery man was now a hijacker. In the cockpit, the pilots received the chilling news. Cooper demanded $200,000 in cash and 4 parachutes upon landing. On the ground, the FBI and local police worked frantically. They had to gather the cash and parachutes while the plane circled above. For 2 hours, the aircraft stayed aloft over Seattle. The sun began to set as the authorities raced against time to meet the demands. The plane finally landed at SeaTac. In exchange for the money and parachutes, Cooper allowed all 36 passengers to walk free. Only a few crew members remained. As refueling trucks approached, the tension on the aircraft remained thick. Cooper was still in control. Cooper sat alone in the cabin, watching the rain beat against the window. He was now preparing for the final phase of his plan. At 7:40 p.m., the plane took off again, heading toward Mexico City. It flew low and slow through a heavy winter storm. Below them lay the vast, unforgiving wilderness of Washington State. The wind howled against the fuselage as the pilots struggled with the controls. Suddenly, a warning light flashed. The rear air stair had been lowered. Into the freezing night and the rushing air, D.B. Cooper vanished. Search parties found nothing. No parachute, no briefcase, and no man. The case of D.B. Cooper remains the greatest mystery in aviation history.
November 24th, 1971, a rainy Thanksgiving Eve in Portland, Oregon. A man carrying a black briefcase approaches the Northwest Orient Airlines counter. He uses the alias Dan Cooper. He is calm, unremarkable, and dressed in a dark business suit with a black tie. He boards Flight 305, a Boeing 727 bound for Seattle. No one knows that within the hour, he will change aviation history forever. The plane takes off into the dark, stormy sky. Cooper sits in seat 18C, lights a cigarette, and orders a bourbon and soda. Shortly after takeoff, he hands a note to the flight attendant. At first, she thinks it's just a lonely traveler's phone number. Cooper leans in and whispers, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb." The mystery of D.B. Cooper begins. The note demanded $200,000 in negotiable American currency and 4 parachutes. He was specific, cold, and calculated. In the cockpit, the pilot receives the terrifying news. The tension is palpable as they communicate with ground control. For 2 hours, the plane circles Seattle while authorities scramble to gather the cash and parachutes Cooper demanded. Cooper remains calm. He isn't a nervous amateur. He knows the aircraft's systems and the terrain below perfectly. The plane finally lands at Seattle-Tacoma Airport. The passengers are told there is a minor mechanical delay, unaware of the hijacking. The money is delivered in a heavy canvas bag. Cooper releases the passengers, but keeps the flight crew as hostages. He orders the pilot to fly toward Mexico City, but he has very specific instructions. Stay below 10,000 feet with the landing gear down. The Boeing 727 takes off again into a fierce winter storm. Wind and rain lash against the fuselage as they head south. Cooper orders the crew into the cockpit. He is alone in the cabin. He begins his final preparations for a daring escape. He ties the bag of cash to his waist. He dons the parachute. His movements are precise, like a man who has jumped before. Suddenly, a warning light flashes in the cockpit. The aft stairs have been lowered. The freezing night air rushes into the cabin. At 8:13 p.m., somewhere over the rugged wilderness of Washington state, D.B. Cooper steps off the stairs and vanishes into the night. The plane lands safely in Reno, but the hijacker is gone. The FBI begins one of the most extensive searches in history. They scour the dense forests and freezing rivers. They find nothing. No parachute, no briefcase, no trace of Dan Cooper. Years pass. In 1980, a young boy finds decaying bundles of $20 bills buried in the sand along the Columbia River. The serial numbers match the ransom money. It is the only physical evidence ever found. But the man himself remains a ghost. Who was D.B. Cooper? Was he a skilled paratrooper or a desperate man who perished in the jump? The FBI officially closed the case in 2016. The legend lives on. A shadow in the sky, a leap into the unknown, and a mystery that may never be solved. Disappeared forever.
The news broke quickly. A man had hijacked a commercial airplane, demanded ransom, and jumped into the night sky. And he was gone. No identity, no body, no explanation. At first, the public thought it was impossible. Planes don't just lose people mid-air. But this one did, and that's when the FBI stepped in fully. The case name was officially assigned NORJAC, Northwest Airlines Hijacking Investigation, and it would become one of the most complex mysteries in American history. Investigators immediately began reconstructing the flight. They focused on flight path over Washington state, weather conditions that night, airspeed and altitude data, crew testimony. Every detail mattered. They tried to understand one thing. Where did he land? But the problem was simple. The Pacific Northwest is massive. Dense forests, rivers, mountains, and almost no visibility at night. If Cooper survived the jump, he could be anywhere or nowhere. Experts studied the jump conditions. Heavy rain, cold wind, low visibility. Even experienced parachutists would struggle. Cooper jumped with a civilian parachute, a heavy money bag at night from a moving aircraft. Everything pointed to survival being extremely unlikely, but there was no evidence of death either. That uncertainty is what kept the case alive. The FBI launched ground search teams across Washington forests, Columbia River Basin, remote mountain regions. Helicopters scanned from above. Dogs were deployed. Maps were divided into search grids. Every inch was checked. But the land gave nothing back. No parachute, no clothing, no money bag. It was as if the sky had swallowed him whole. The ransom money was carefully recorded. Each bill had serial numbers. This gave investigators hope. If Cooper spent the money, he could be tracked. But weeks passed, then months, nothing. No large purchases, no suspicious deposits, no financial trail. It was like the money had vanished with him. As time passed, theories began to split. Theory 1, he died in the jump. Most logical explanation. Theory 2, he survived, but got lost. Theory 3, he escaped successfully. Requires extreme parachuting skill. Implies deep planning. The FBI could not commit to any theory fully, because none had proof. Months later, investigators began narrowing the possible landing zones. Based on aircraft speed, wind direction, jump timing, they created a probable drop zone in southwestern Washington. Still nothing. But the mystery grew deeper, because now the question changed. Not just where did he land, but did he land at all? The case exploded in American culture. News outlets called him the Sky Ghost, the Invisible Hijacker, the man who fell from history. Books were written. Documentaries started forming. People began imagining him as a mastermind criminal, a military veteran, even a folk hero. Some admired him, some feared him, but everyone agreed on one thing. He had done the impossible. A man jumped from a plane. The FBI searched an entire region, and the world watched a mystery deepen. No body, no parachute, no clear answers, only questions. After the hijacking in 1971, the investigation slowly cooled down. Not because it was solved, but because it had nowhere left to go. The FBI had no body, no parachute, no confirmed landing site, no suspect identity. Just a man who stepped off a plane and vanished. For years, the case became a file in storage, but the Pacific Northwest never forgot him. And then, something unexpected happened. It was 1978, 7 years after the hijacking. A young boy was playing near the Columbia River in Washington state. He wasn't looking for anything special, just exploring the riverbank like kids do. Then he noticed something strange. Bundles of old, decaying paper sticking out of the sand. He picked them up. They were dirty, wet, barely readable. But when investigators examined them later, their meaning became shocking. The papers were confirmed as D.B. Cooper ransom money. Serial numbers matched perfectly. A total of $5,800 was recovered, buried near the river. This was the first physical evidence found since the hijacking. And it changed everything, because now the FBI knew one thing for certain: Cooper, or the money, had landed somewhere near the Columbia River system. But it also created a new mystery. Why was only a small portion found? Where was the rest? And more importantly, who buried it there? Experts analyzed the condition of the bills: weather damage, soil penetration, water erosion patterns. They concluded something important. The money had likely been buried for years, not scattered, not dropped, but intentionally placed. That meant two possibilities. Possibility 1, Cooper survived and buried part of the money later. Possibility 2, someone else found it and moved it. Neither could be proven. But both opened terrifying new questions. After the discovery, the FBI returned to their calculations. They refined the landing zone based on wind drift models, flight speed data, time of jump, terrain analysis. The revised zone pointed again to heavily forested river regions in southwestern Washington, but the terrain was massive: thick trees, steep slopes. Finding one man, or evidence from one jump, was like searching for a needle in a living forest. One major theory emerged. Cooper may have planned his landing near the Columbia River deliberately. Why? Because water could erase footprints, and forest cover hides parachute impact. River currents could carry evidence away. If true, this wasn't a random jump. It was a controlled escape plan. But there was a problem. No parachute was ever found. No clothing, no equipment, just money. A small piece of it. The discovery of money didn't confirm survival. Instead, it raised doubt in every direction, because investigators realized something crucial. If Cooper survived and buried the money, why only $5,800? And if someone else buried it, who? And why? The case split deeper into theories. While investigators debated, the public turned Cooper into something else. A myth. He became a symbol of impossible escape. A ghost story in modern America, a mystery that refused to die. Books, documentaries, and theories multiplied. Some believed he was a former paratrooper, a criminal mastermind, even a man who lived under a new identity. But no identity matched. He remained faceless, nameless, timeless. A small bundle of money emerged from the earth 7 years after a man jumped from a plane. But instead of solving the case, it made the mystery deeper. Because now investigators had proof of only one thing: D.B. Cooper had touched the ground. But what happened after that remains unknown. After the discovery of the ransom money near the Columbia River, one thing became clear. The case was not over. It had only changed shape. The FBI now had proof that at least part of the money reached the ground. But proof of money was not proof of a man, and that created the biggest question of all. Who was D.B. Cooper? Investigators started building a psychological and physical profile based on behavior during the hijacking. They concluded Cooper was likely male, around 30-45 years old, calm under pressure, knowledgeable about aircraft, familiar with parachutes or aviation, possibly military trained. But none of this was certain. It was only educated analysis. Still, it narrowed thousands of possibilities into a few dozen serious suspects. Over time, the FBI investigated hundreds of individuals, but a few names stood out, not because they were proven guilty, but because they matched too many details. Some were former military paratroopers, aviation engineers, known criminals with aviation knowledge, civil engineers, and pilots. Each suspect created hope, and each one ended in disappointment, because none could be confirmed. One of the strongest theories pointed toward military experience. Why? Because Cooper demonstrated confidence in jumping from altitude, understanding of aircraft systems, ability to remain calm under pressure, knowledge of rear staircase mechanism on a Boeing 727. This led investigators to search military parachute records. Thousands of names were reviewed. But again, no perfect match emerged. Some suspects were close, but none fit completely. Every time a new suspect appeared, the pattern repeated. At first, strong resemblance to behavioral profile, some aviation background, sometimes even physical similarity. Then, weak alibi contradictions or no evidence at all. Finally, no proof linking them to the hijacking. One by one, suspects were eliminated. Not because they were innocent, but because there was no way to prove they were guilty. The case remained frozen. While the FBI struggled, the public imagination took over. Cooper became a mastermind thief, a symbol of rebellion, a perfect criminal who escaped justice. TV shows, books, and documentaries added layers of myth. Some even romanticized him. But investigators saw something different. A man who risked everything on a jump into darkness. Over the years, multiple people came forward claiming to be D.B. Cooper. Some were attention seekers, some were mentally unstable, some even provided fake evidence. no fingerprints, no DNA, no confirmed parachute recovery, no surveillance footage. In 1971, aviation security was minimal. That meant the crime was executed in a way that left almost no trace, and that made it almost impossible to solve decades later. By the late 1980s and 1990s, the investigation slowed significantly. Technology improved, forensics advanced, but the case remained stuck. Because Cooper had done something rare in criminal history, he didn't just disappear physically, he disappeared from evidence. No trace, no identity, no confirmed ending, only theories, dozens of suspects, hundreds of leads. Thousands of hours of investigation, but still no answer. D.B. Cooper was no longer just a hijacker. He had become something else entirely, a question that refused to be solved. For years, the FBI had chased shadows. Dozens of suspects came and went. But in the mid-1970s, one name began to stand out more than the rest: Richard McCoy Jr. Unlike previous suspects, McCoy wasn't just speculation. He had already done something terrifyingly similar: a skyjacking, a parachute escape, a method that looked almost identical to D.B. Cooper, and that's when investigators started paying serious attention. In April 1972, just months after Cooper vanished, a man boarded a plane in the United States. His demands were shocking: money, parachutes, a controlled flight path, just like Cooper. But this time the ending was different. The man didn't disappear into history. He was caught. His name, Richard McCoy Jr., a former military veteran with parachute training. And suddenly, the FBI had a problem, because McCoy looked too close to Cooper's method to ignore. McCoy's escape attempt involved hijacking a Boeing 727, demanding ransom money, forcing a rear staircase jump, using parachute equipment. Everything matched Cooper's strategy almost step by step. But McCoy made one critical mistake. He got identified later and arrested. Now investigators wondered, was McCoy copying Cooper? Or was McCoy Cooper himself? The similarities were too strong to ignore. Military background, parachute knowledge, aircraft familiarity, hijacking method match. Some investigators believed McCoy might have been D.B. Cooper, or at least inspired by him. But there was a major problem. Timeline and evidence didn't fully align. McCoy was in custody at the time of Cooper's hijacking. That eliminated him. But it also raised a darker idea. If McCoy could do it, Cooper might have been military too. The FBI began focusing less on suspects and more on skills required for the jump. Cooper demonstrated knowledge of 727 aircraft rear stairs, airspeed control, altitude safety limits, parachute handling basics. This was not random behavior. It suggested preparation, maybe even training. But where would he learn all of this? Military, aviation school, engineering background? No one could confirm. One haunting detail remained. No one ever saw Cooper leave the aircraft. No eyewitness confirmed the exact jump. Only crew observations, wind disturbance, open stairs. The sky itself became the only witness, and the sky does not testify. It only holds secrets. By the late 1970s and 1980s, investigators were divided into two camps. Camp 1, Cooper died in the jump. Extreme weather conditions, no survival gear confirmed, no physical remains found. Camp 2, Cooper survived. Money buried later suggests activity. No body ever recovered. Possible escape plan. Both sides had arguments. Neither side had proof. The case stayed frozen. Even though McCoy looked like a strong suspect, he could not be Cooper. Why? Because he was verified in custody during 1971 hijacking. Witness records contradicted timing. FBI confirmed he could not physically be in two places. So the mystery deepened again. McCoy wasn't Cooper, but he proved something important. The method was possible, and that made the original crime even more terrifying. By now, D.B. Cooper was no longer just a hijacker. He had become a media icon, a criminal legend, a puzzle without solution. People began asking, was he a pilot, a military man, a genius planner, or just lucky? But the truth stayed hidden, because every answer led to another question. A copycat hijacking confirmed the method was possible. A military-trained suspect showed how it could be done. But the original man, the one who started it all, still had no identity. Only silence, only sky, only disappearance. After years of chasing names and false leads, the FBI made a major shift. Instead of asking who did it, they started asking what kind of person could do it. Because the evidence was too thin for direct identification, but it was strong enough to build a behavioral blueprint. And that blueprint was disturbing. It didn't describe an average criminal. It described someone precise, calm, and unusually prepared. Based on flight behavior, demands, and execution, investigators refined Cooper's profile. He was likely male, middle-aged, calm under extreme pressure, highly intelligent or experienced in technical fields, familiar with aircraft structure, comfortable with risk and isolation, possibly trained in military or aviation environments. But one detail stood out more than anything else. He was not improvising. Everything he did suggested planning. One of the biggest mysteries was how Cooper knew about the aircraft's rear stairs. The Boeing 727 had a unique feature. Rear aft staircase can be opened mid-flight under certain conditions, allows external access during flight operations. At the time, this was not common public knowledge, so investigators asked, how did he know? Possible explanations included aviation industry experience, airline employee exposure, military transport familiarity, extensive research before hijacking, but none could be proven. Cooper was given 4 parachutes, 2 main parachutes, 2 reserve parachutes. But investigators believed something important. He didn't just accept parachutes, he understood them. He selected specific ones from available options. This suggested experience. But another question remained. Did he bring his own knowledge or his own equipment? No evidence ever confirmed either. The Columbia River region wasn't random. It had dense forests, wide river systems, low population density, difficult nighttime visibility. If Cooper chose this area deliberately, it meant he studied escape geography before the hijacking. That level of planning suggested intelligence beyond average criminals. It also suggested something darker. He expected to survive. Some investigators proposed a bold idea. Cooper didn't just jump randomly. He may have planned a controlled landing strategy, timing jump with terrain visibility, using wind direction for drift control, choosing a river-adjacent landing zone. If true, it would mean he treated the jump like an operation, not panic escape. But without physical evidence, it remained theory. Normally, cold cases fade over time, but Cooper was different. Because no body was found, no confirmed suspect identified, only partial ransom recovery existed. Aviation method was unprecedented. So even decades later, the FBI kept revisiting it. Every new technology brought hope. DNA analysis, geographic modeling, flight simulation reconstruction. But nothing broke the core mystery. One of the most frustrating truths for investigators was this: the sky gave no evidence back, no wreckage trail, no parachute fabric confirmed, no definitive landing signature, just wind, darkness, and uncertainty. The environment itself erased the crime scene, and that made Cooper unique, not just as a criminal, but as a disappearance. By now, experts were split again. Theory A, perfect planning, deep aviation knowledge, calculated jump timing, controlled escape attempt. Theory B, extreme luck, survived by chance, died later without trace, money found accidentally. Both theories had weaknesses, neither explained everything. The FBI built a profile of a man who should not have existed. Too skilled for a random criminal, too invisible for a professional agent, too precise for pure luck. And yet, no identity ever matched perfectly. D.B. Cooper remained a ghost built from logic and absence.
By the 1990s and 2000s, the D.B. Cooper case had become something unusual in FBI history. It was no longer just an investigation. It was a public obsession. Every few years, a new name would appear. A new, real Cooper. A new claim. A new theory. But every lead had the same ending. It almost fit, but never fully matched. The mystery refused to lock into a single identity. Over time, several suspects became widely discussed in media and research communities. Each had compelling arguments, but none were ever confirmed. The military paratrooper theory. Some believed Cooper was a trained airborne soldier. Why? Controlled behavior, knowledge of parachutes, and calm under pressure. But no verified military record matched perfectly, and no direct evidence linked any soldier to the flight. The airline employee theory. Another idea suggested Cooper worked in aviation. Why? Knowledge of Boeing 727 rear stairs and flight procedures, but no employee records matched identity, and no airport or airline logs pointed to him. The professional criminal theory. Some believed he was an experienced robber. Why? Demands were structured and strategic with clean execution, but no prior criminal record matched the complexity, and no repeat offenses like this case ever appeared. Each theory had something in common. It explained part of Cooper, but never all of him. Military theory explains parachute skill. Aviation theory explains aircraft knowledge. Criminal theory explains ransom demand. But no single theory explains it all. That gap is what keeps the case alive. In the 2000s, investigators revisited physical evidence using modern science. They examined ransom money fragments, clothing fibers, and environmental residue from recovered bills. They hoped for DNA traces, biological material, fingerprints, or skin cells, but the results were disappointing. Time had erased almost everything. While official investigations slowed, something unexpected happened. The internet brought Cooper back to life. Online communities began reconstructing flight paths, mapping landing zones, debating suspects, and creating documentaries and simulations. Forums, YouTube channels, and podcasts turned Cooper into a global mystery again. The public investigation became more active than the official one. Cooper began to be labeled in two ways: criminal perspective, hijacker, dangerous offender; cultural perspective, genius planner, myth-like figure. This dual identity made him unique. He was both a crime case and a legend at the same time. Even with thousands of theories, no suspect ever fully replaced Cooper, because something was missing in every attempt. No confirmed identity, no complete skill match, no verified escape record, and no financial trace after 1971. Eventually, the FBI stopped actively pursuing suspects, not because the case was solved, but because there was no new evidence to follow. The case remained open technically, but inactive operationally, and Cooper remained. Unidentified, unlocated, unresolved. A man boarded a plane in 1971 and never returned to history. After decades of investigation, analysis, and theories, the D.B. Cooper case always returns to just three possible outcomes. Not hundreds, not dozens, only three, and none of them can be fully proven. This first theory is the most widely accepted among experts: the unsurvived jump. Cooper jumps into storm conditions, cold air, and forested wilderness. In this version, he survives the exit from the plane, but dies shortly after landing, succumbed to injury, exposure, or drowning. This explains why no body or financial activity was ever found. Nature erased the evidence, but it fails to explain his perfect control and confidence. The second theory is the most mysterious: the successful escape. In this version, he lands successfully, retrieves the money, and disappears into civilian life, changing his identity or leaving the country. This explains his intelligent planning, but fails to explain why no witness ever recognized him later, or why no traceable money was ever used. The third is the most philosophical: the blind zone of history. In this version, Cooper is not just a person, but a moment in history. A perfectly executed disappearance that happened when no modern surveillance or forensic technology existed. The crime existed in a blind zone, and once it passed, it became impossible to reverse. Most crimes are solved or forgotten, but D.B. Cooper is different. His case has a clear beginning and action, but an unclear ending. That missing ending turns a crime into a legend. The most haunting truth is simple: the sky never returned anything. No body, no parachute, no confirmed landing. Just silence.